Good evening. If you've been trying to buy a house lately, you'd know that demand is up, competition is fierce, prices are going through the roof. The government's decision to remove red tape for foreign investors is having a big impact on the market. And now there's concern the overseas raiders are buying properties and leaving them vacant, reducing housing stock and driving rental prices even higher. Claire Brady has this report.
Now it's your turn. $25,000 anywhere else at all.
Overseas buyers who land bank could spell the death of real estate in Australia.
Are you all done?
It just keeps fueling the market, and I would imagine that it will mean that prices continue to rise.
Up to 40% of the market is being underpinned by overseas interests.
The property is going, it's sold.
Our real estate market is no longer ours. A foreign invasion, the likes of which we've never seen before, has pushed prices up as much as 10%, leaving a growing number of us no longer able to afford a home in our own neighbourhood.
With foreign ownership rules being relaxed and the taxes overseas being, a third of what ours are, the obvious benefits are to the overseas buyer. So it's not a level playing field at all.
Having returned to the country to care for her elderly parents, Yvonne Troedson has been locked out of the market. The competition so fierce that despite attending 80 auctions, she hasn't stood a chance. Amid concern, housing stock is dwindling even further because some overseas buyers are land banking.
We know in this area alone that there is a gentleman who owns 24 properties. I think only 2 are rented out.
This home in a well-to-do Melbourne suburb was bought by foreigners. It's been vacant for 3 months. And a similar story at this home. And this once grand residence bought by a Malaysian family stands decrepit behind barbed wire and padlocks. It's been like this for more than 20 years.
If there's no one living in these houses, it is not serving the community, it's not serving Australia, and financially it's actually going to do a lot of damage.
We have heard anecdotally from a number of estate agents around the place that a number of these places have been bought and they're just set there. They're maintained, but nobody's living in there.
Buyers advocate Chris Corrin.
I've called it land banking money, if you like. So if you've got a $3 million property, you know it's going to be $6 million in 7 to 10 years. So even if the place is empty, you're going to make money out of it.
The sad thing about that is that we've got a vacancy rate that's an almost lowest ever. So if they're not going to live in them, please don't leave them vacant. Lease them out. Take the pressure off the rental market.
Real estate agent Tim Fletcher, whose sales to foreign buyers account for 35% of his business, urges them to do the right thing.
Some of them are getting multiple homes in like 10 or 15. And one person I know recently who got 20. I understand some are vacant and some are being rented. I'd like to see them all being rented.
The government relaxed foreign ownership rules earlier this year. Among the changes, temporary residents can now buy property without getting approval. And foreign students, once capped at $300,000, can now buy a property for any amount.
The fundamental and tough rule that foreigners who are not residents are not permitted to buy Australian existing real estate is unchanged.
When we spoke to Assistant Treasurer Senator Nick Sherry, he thought the changes would have little impact, adding if the home is bought by a temporary resident, the rules state it must be their primary place of residence.
Treasury advised us, and we gave an instruction to Treasury, that these simplification administration changes were not to increase the demand for and purchase of existing Australian housing stock from overseas. It hasn't done so.
There's a perception out there, and it's somewhat akin to boat people, if you like. Things have been relaxed a bit, let's just go for it. And in my 28 years of real estate, I've never seen such an involvement with overseas purchases ever.
But real estate agent Robert Ding knows not all foreign buyers are hurting the market.
I have a client at the moment who has been here for 8 months, has bought 6 properties, but they have actually rented them out. So they enjoy that aspect of having their investment secure here in Australia.
The government needs to realise that the populace, the people that have voted them into power, are having difficulty buying houses because there's an unfair competition element that's come into the marketplace. If they don't realise this, it's going to be to their own peril.
Going. Sold.
In our basic, shallow monetary world, life is split into two important categories. First category is our income. Most of us get this through employment, others through investment returns. The other category is our cost of living. It can be made up of many things, but there are three that are crucial necessities to our modern high-tech existence. The first is shelter. It protects us from harsh elements such as rain, cold, or heat, depending on season. So it is so crucial housing is protected under Article 17 of the United Nations Human Rights Resolution. Unfortunately, the cost of shelter in Australia is excessive. Home ownership costs 8 times the average annual income. By comparison, US and Canadian home ownership costs 3 times the average annual income before the global financial crisis. Aussie housing is expensive because state governments overtax land, landlords, builders, and developers. Our incompetent state governments also do not release enough land for our population growth. Don't forget the previous video. Australia's federal government has now also cut red tape for foreign investors wanting to buy up our already scarce housing, which will force up already excessive housing prices up even further. Labor's incompetent state governments have also forced skyrocketing rents up further, so alternatives to an excessive mortgage are not any better. The average Sydney-sider used to spend 1/3 of their income on rent. That has ballooned to 55%. But Australia's incompetent state governments have forbidden competing supermarket chains being too close to one another. This allows the Coles-Woolworths duopoly to gouge food prices to the highest levels in the developed world. Sydney-siders pay more for their food than residents of a notoriously expensive city, Paris. So food is now taking an ever-increasing chunk of Australian incomes. Kevin 07's emission trading scheme will push excessive food prices even higher. Now, our federal Labor government wants to force the price of energy up. Soon, energy will be an unaffordable luxury. Notice the cost of living bar is now higher than the income bar. More and more Australians will be forced out of housing into shanty towns without running water and power. Boa-vinda favelas brasileiras. Welcome the Brazilian favelas to our fair Aussie shores. Despite this, Labor has done Australia a great service. They will have given us a good list of names for naming our shanty towns. Car City in the western suburbs of Sydney. Favela Tripodi in Sydney's Hills District. Ruddville on the Hawkesbury. Sartor Town in the inner west. And for the discerning slum dweller with a taste of luxury and water views, we present Morris Yema City. But be quick, these huts are going fast. Remember, while we start living a lifestyle similar to residents of Somalia and Sierra Leone, we will still be able to hold our heads up high knowing we are lowering our environmental carbon footprint. All thanks to the Australian Labor Party. Who am I kidding? I would rather have tolerated John Howard's work choices than live in a future dotted with Labor's slums.